More than $1 billion in damage, at least 13 people dead. That's after the deadly flooding in South Carolina, following that historic rainfall this weekend.
Bridges have collapsed and roads have been washed out. And even though the rain has stopped falling, the governor warns that the flooding isn't over yet. Ephraim Graham brings us that story.
It took a Coast Guard chopper to rescue this mother and her 15-month-old baby. Father Ian Walt says even though their home is built on 8-foot stilts, the water rose too quickly.
It was one of those things where it was so chaotic, so fast.
It was already too late for 911.
And they said, there's nothing that we can do for you right now.
And their terrifying ordeal is the story of South Carolina this week.
There he goes.
This man was trapped in his 2-ton truck swirling in quick-moving water before a bystander helped to rescue him. 2 feet of water has been dumped on the state in 2 days. 16 inches fell on this creek area near Columbia Sunday. It was the rainiest day in one single spot in the U.S. in more than 15 years. The governor is warning her state to prepare for more flooding and evacuations as the rainwater moves to the low-lying coast.
Just because the rain stops does not mean that we are out of the woods.
There's great concern about the potential for even more washed-out roads and bridges, thanks to poor and deficient infrastructure in many places. Some 40,000 people are also without drinking water, and there's no quick way to get them any. Operation Blessing has a convoy on the ground in Columbia. The goal? Help families wiped out by the flooding.
We're going to be mobilizing volunteers to go out into the flooded neighborhoods to do debris cleanup, pull out furniture, rip out sheetrock, flooded debris, and bringing it to the curb. We have our mobile command center, our mobile kitchen so that we can feed hot meals.
Going forward, it's a big job in South Carolina, from ongoing flooding concerns to cleanup in the aftermath. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
It's beyond belief, but we're going to be there. And by the way, the big thing right now they need is fresh drinking water. 40,000 people without fresh drinking water. So we can do that. We also have the ability to chlorinate water and purify it. So our Operation Blessing team is going to be there, teams in South Carolina, giving all the help we can. If you want to participate, it's 1-800-759-0700. So it's Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. Well, in other news, people in Oregon are also dealing with the aftermath of a tragedy, that deadly shooting rampage by a killer who targeted Christians. Now, some of them are telling CBN News what actually happened after his attack. John Jessup has that story.
That's right, Pat. We're learning more in the wake of that massacre, including the fact that pastors and other first responders rushed to the staging area where survivors and their families reunited after that mass shooting. 3 of the local pastors that provided on-site counseling that day sat down with CBN News to talk about ministering through the tragedy and how God is leading their community forward.
For me and for our congregation, we are deeply challenged that if these 9 are willing to stand and take a bullet and confess their faith, then Christ followers at Garden Valley Church in Roseburg or anywhere can stand and live their faith out every day. The pastors that were summoned to the staging area, it was just an amazing display of God's grace and God's care for the community. There's 40 churches in Douglas County that are part of a network, and because we've been doing the work of building unity amongst ourselves, the payoff came in a crisis.
Actually, it was quite overwhelming. If you didn't stay focused on the one and you looked around, it was insane. I've heard this from 2 eyewitnesses. He asked, if you're a Christian or you have God, stand up. They stood up. And he asked them, are you a Christian and do you have God? And when they said yes, then he said, well, then this won't hurt. The others were scared now. And he demanded of everyone in the room, he was going down row by row, and he said, what's your religion? And they didn't even want to say. a Buddhist or I'm a Jehovah's Witness or they were frozen in fear, so he shot them multiple times. I don't see it as a Christian thing altogether, because there was other faiths there, and they got the same treatment as the Christians.
For a lot of the families that were there, that they were going to wait for another 5 or 6 hours just to find out that their loved one wasn't coming home. It was a pretty raw day. Everybody has got a story, and it's going to be days and weeks and months for a lot of these people to begin to walk through and find some health and healing.
Pat, back to you.
Well, I just say that our heart goes out to those people, and you think of the bravery, but that man was a Satanist. He was a Satanist. He wanted to be a prince in Lucifer's army. He made it clear. So we weren't dealing with some, quote, gun violence. What we're dealing with is satanic violence against people of faith. And it shames us all to think many times that you're in a crowd and they say, well, do you know the Lord? Well, I'm not sure, kind of thing. Do you want to carry your Bible? Well, not really. I want to be embarrassed. And those people were willing to stand up and take a bullet and be shot dead because of the name of Jesus. It humbles us all. John?
Pat, California is now the 5th state in the country to legalize assisted suicide. Governor Jerry Brown signed a bill that allows terminally ill patients to legally end their lives using doctor-prescribed drugs. The bill includes requirements that the patient be capable of taking the medication themselves and that 2 doctors approve it. But opponents say the bill legalizes what they call premature suicide.
People should know that where assisted suicide is legal, some people's lives will be lost without their consent through mistakes and abuse. No safeguards have ever been enacted or even proposed that can prevent that outcome, which can never be undone.
At least 24 other states have introduced right-to-die legislation this year, but the measures have not been approved. Today, more than 2 million Americans are locked up behind bars, putting the country ahead of any other in the world with the most people in prison. But now, Democrats and Republicans in Washington have come together with a bill that could finally reform the criminal justice system so people aren't going to prison unnecessarily. Jennifer Wishon has that story.
These are some of the most influential senators on Capitol Hill.
We come from different spots on the political spectrum.
But instead of pointing fingers at each other, they're shaking hands over a proposal to reform America's criminal justice system.
This is a bill that we can be proud of.
The senators say their reforms will make America safer. Former prosecutors like Utah Republican Senator Mike Lee, who helped craft the bill, say too often in America the punishment doesn't fit the crime, that the law imposes unnecessarily harsh punishments on too many offenses, putting more people in prison than need to be there. The senator's bill gives judges the ability to hand out sentences below the mandatory federal guidelines for nonviolent drug offenders. Inmates currently serving time who are considered low risk to be repeat offenders can also reduce their sentences by 25% by taking part in rehab programs. Eligible inmates must undergo regular tests to determine their likelihood of reoffending. Those who get their sentences reduced would be released into some sort of community-based supervision. The proposal also gets rid of the 3 strikes and you're out law that requires life sentences for some nonviolent offenses. Senators say special care was taken to ensure that violent career criminals stay locked up.
Members of the House are working on their own legislation, but the Senate version already has the support of President Obama, who calls the proposed changes a historic step forward towards addressing systemic problems in America's criminal justice system.
1 in 3 American adults has a criminal record of some kind.
That's some 80 million Americans. Lance Lamons helps lead a coalition of unlikely allies pushing for reform, bringing groups like the NAACP together with the Faith and Freedom Coalition.
The fact that not only these groups have come together, but the millions of individual Americans who these groups represent, it's more than just a Washington, D.C. thing. I think it is a grassroots moving up through the channels, and now it's finally arrived in Washington.
Over the past 3 decades, the number of Americans incarcerated has increased by 500%. Incarceration is a significant budget line item, too. This year, taxpayers will spend $80 billion to keep people locked up, including a disproportionate number of minorities. And get this, an estimated 2.5 million children live in homes where at least one parent is behind bars.
Is that really how we want our children to be raised? Is this cycle something that we want to continue, or is there a way to break it? And we think that the movement that we've seen is a way to break that cycle, and I call it, breaking the cycle of incarceration and incorporating a cycle of redemption instead.
Supporters of reform give credit to Christian groups like Prison Fellowship for sounding the alarm years ago on the need for more rehabilitation.
Committing crime is not moral, but neither is over-punishing moral, and we have to find the right balance between the morality of punishment and the immorality of over-punishment.
Although there's broad support for making changes in the prison system, the legislative clock is ticking. President Obama says he'd like to have a bill on his desk before the end of the year. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Jennifer. And Pat, you've been advocating for criminal justice reform for some time.
For years and years. We did a series called A Nation of Criminals to show the shocking abuse of our laws. I'll tell you, one way to solve some of this problem would be literally to nullify all of the criminal sanctions that are attached to bills, actions by federal agencies. If Congress passed a law, that's one thing, but the federal agencies putting criminal sanctions, if they were all nullified, you would solve a large problem of this. But it came out of this idea of being tough on crime. I know there's a governor here who was a good friend who was so proud of the fact that they had abolished parole. Well, now in Richmond, Virginia, they're coming back with bills to say, well, let's modify that because parole was a good thing. But to put somebody in prison for 5 years or 10 years because he's got several ounces of marijuana in his possession is just outrageous. It's just absolutely insane. And we have done it, this thing, I'm going to be tough on crime, and each politician tried to outdo the other politician. Now they're waking up to the damage that's been done, and thank the Lord they are, and thank the Lord it's bipartisan. But I'm not sure they're going far enough. But certainly nonviolent offenders shouldn't be locked up in federal prisons. Restitution is one way of solving the problem. The other is community service. Let them work to pay off what they've stolen. Let them meet the people that they have defrauded and pay the money back. That kind of thing. That's biblical. Restitution, not incarceration. So congratulations. Let's take it far. Let's make sure we don't come short of where we ought to be.